Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to Paresh 9561, all the way from India, watching over on Instagram. I'm going to quickly address this one. Dan Cullen saying you're not on Facebook yet. I am broadcasting to two different channels over on Facebook. One on Demolition News, one on Diggers and Dozers, and I can see that Jim Turner is watching on Facebook. Gary Muirhead, good morning, Gary, is watching on Facebook as well. So yeah, Facebook apparently is working. Not entirely sure what's going on at your end, Dan, but it looks like it's working. Let me run through. I'm going to say very quick good morning to Dan Cullen, and Paresh 9561 over on Instagram just said, I like your show. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, Dan Cullen's here. Chris Ford is here. Good morning. Got your swimming ready? Got your swimming ready, or did you get a blowjob over the weekend? Sadly, neither of those things is true. Alex Latham is here. Good morning, Alex. Jim Turner is here. Gary Muirhead is here. And Dan Cullen has just confirmed that Facebook has finally caught up with us. Oddly enough, if you've been here for any regularity, you'll know that Facebook has been playing up. Today, it didn't. So I don't know exactly what's gone wrong. Maybe it's decided not to play up before I go live. It's decided to do it after I've gone live. I don't know. It's all beyond my ken. The weekend. So let's talk about the weekend. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people sending me details of this poll to get a second general election. Let's have a think about that. First of all, my first thought with all of this is the fact that this is one of the other downsides of having Donald Trump in the world. Remember America? He lost the election but refused to accept it. Well, I think we've got a few 100,000 people in the UK that are doing exactly the same thing. There was a time you'd have a general election, the winner won, the loser lost, and we'd all get on with our lives. Apparently now, because of the ease with which you can create an online poll, and it is gaining momentum, but, you know, that is, I think, what is behind that. The other thing, well, there are a couple of things to bear in mind. I actually said this on the WhatsApp group over the weekend. Has a British public protest ever actually achieved anything? I can't think of one. I'll be honest, I've not been overly scientific about it. I've not been into the history books and had a look, but as far as I can remember, no public protesters ever actually won. And even though that poll to call for a second general election to get rid of Mr. Starmer, don't forget, more than 14 million of your fellow British residents said that Keir Starmer was their man. Now, I'm sure there are a few among that 14 million that are now kicking themselves and regretting their decision. But you've got a long way to go before you actually overweigh that. And ultimately, is Keir Starmer, with his however many seats majority he's got, is he really going to abandon all of that and say, yes, okay, I'll do the decent thing. We'll have a second election, knowing full well that he may well get a kick in the pants. Can't see it. It's going to hog the headlines for a few weeks, and then I'm sure it'll all die away. Jim Turner, a couple of million, actually. Yeah, well, because I'm so disinterested in it, because I don't actually see it going anywhere, I've got to be honest, I've not been following it. What is the number now? I don't know. I've literally just kind of keyed out. And there's our friend Mick, just joined us as well. Morning, Mick. Mick's arrival just reminded me, I haven't got the banner playing across the bottom of the screen, and it is this. Does Demolition receive the respect it deserves? That is going to be the subject of my after-show monologue. Dan Cullen says, I'm with you. No protest has ever worked. No, as far as I can remember, no protest has ever worked. And Mark Whiting is... okay, we can start the show now because Mark Whiting has just joined us, and as we all know, ain't no party like a Mark Whiting party. I may be the first person in the world to have said that, but yeah, you never know. So, shall we rock on? I think we probably should. Without further ado, I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show very much on the road. Right, okay, so going back to all things about this poll to call for a second election, Jim Turner says it doesn't need to get what it's asking for, but it will get the plenty of Labour MPs wondering whether the three wise monkeys should actually be leading their party. It's a good question, good point. Got a funny feeling this one will impact on Starmer. We can only hope so. Mark Whiting says, thanks, Mark. Not a problem at all. And Dan Cullen, no, it doesn't get the respect it deserves. We're talking about Demolition. We'll be doing that later in the show, but I am very much on that mind, and I can tell you that the inspiration behind that is the new president of the Institute of Demolition Engineers, which is Adrian McLean. I interviewed him on Friday, came away feeling rather better about the world, or certainly about the demolition world. I'll be releasing that video in the next day or two, so watch out for that. But it is Monday, the 25th of November, which means it's my sister's birthday tomorrow, but that's a whole other story. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the walrus of demolition. In today's show, why Hyundai is the new kid on the block. Blocks plural, sparking interest in LiuGong loaders. We're going to witness the birth of a mine and how Epiroc is helping segregate demolition waste. Plus, as I've already said in my morning monologue, I'm going to be calling for the demolition sector to be given the respect it so richly deserves. But before we get to all that, we do have that small matter of our mystery machine to solve and unravel. So, back after this. Do need to say a very quick good morning to Messrs. Hatcher and who else was there? Yeah, Footy. Our friend Footy has just arrived. Better late than never, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for being here. And you've arrived just in time to see today's mystery machine, which looks like that. There you are. That's what we're looking for you to identify. We would like, please, a make and a model, if you would be so kind. Be so kind. Jim Turner says, how's about this question then? If no protest has ever worked, why were we talking the other day about how an industry union that holds a regular questionnaire petitions present to the industry's leaders? And it's a good point. It's a very good point. And I think, okay, so let me answer that question in complete honesty, shall I? Even if we had a union of 1 million men and women strong in the UK demolition and construction industry, do I, hand on heart, think that it would make any difference to the powers that be in the industry? And I have to say, hand on heart, no, I don't. I really don't. I do think it would make them think twice. I think it might steer their thinking a little bit. Would it actually make any real radical change? Personally, I do not believe so. And I wonder if it's the fact that we're less emphatic in our protest here in the UK. And trust me, but please believe me when I say this, I shouldn't have to preempt this, but, you know, there are the keyboard warriors out there. I am not for one moment suggesting that we should be burning sheep in the streets like the French do. I'm not suggesting we should be storming the capital, like the Americans do. But do you really think an online poll is going to change the way of the world? Or the way of the country, at the very least? Personally, I don't believe so. And Jim Turner says, it amounts to the same thing, a public show of no confidence. Yeah, absolutely. But we had a public show of no confidence, 1.5 million strong, before we went into, was it Iraq, in our quest for weapons of mass destruction. And Tony Blair and his cohorts went, 1.5 million people. They clearly don't want us to do that. And then did it the same afternoon. So, you know, Mick says... whatever, it's nearly 2 million and has to be debated in Parliament. It does, but can we actually see it making a difference? Any voicing of opinion will always sway future decisions. Do you think? And I'm genuine. I'm not being sarcastic here. I'm genuine asking a question. Do you actually think that is the case? I mean, the thing that seems, there are many things that have sparked this, but the thing that seems to have sparked it the most is this whole business with the farmers and inheritance tax and so on down the line. And, you know, maybe a bit of winter fuel allowance stirred into the mix as well for the older generation. Is anyone expecting them to do a U-turn on that? I'm not. I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love my in-laws to get their heating allowance back. I'd love Jeremy Clarkson to get his money back in his pocket and so on, but I can't see it personally. Now, going back to the mystery machine, that is what it looks like. The first guess was from Gary Muirhead, who reckons it could be a JCB 2CX Airmaster. I know, it is not one of those. A Wolf WZ45-17, says Dan Cullen. It's not one of those. Or a JCB 3CX Pro. It's not one of those either. Let me show you a smidgen more. There you are. There's a slice of cab. Mick says, a lot of Labour are holding on to their balls and nests. Yeah, I bet they are. I mean, I think where this could impact, and I don't know what the current situation is in the various constituencies, but if there are any local elections coming up, particularly those that are in and around farming communities, I think that could make a difference. But nationally, can I see it? Not really. Hey, listen, I'm very, very seldom right, as my wife tells me with increasing regularity. I could well be wrong on this, but that's my feeling on it. Just going back to the mystery machine, Dan Cullen reckons it could be a LiuGong 766A. It is not. Jim Turner says politics is a popularity contest, which is precisely why I've never gone into politics. Anything that involves voting always has been. That's why it doesn't work. That's a good point. Now, Gary Muirhead has gone for a mystery machine, the Terex TL65. It's not a Terex, although it kind of is. It's not, but it kind of is. Does that help at all? Let me show you just a bit more before we get on with the show. There's the colour scheme that you're working with. Is that a one-off colour scheme, or is that actually the colour? We shall see. Going to take that away for just a moment, because I do need to very quickly remind you of today's question of the day. I'm not even sure if I've posted the question of the day. Doesn't look like I have. So let me post the question of the day, which is now there, and I'm going to remind you of it right this moment. Yeah, a question of the day today is this. What TV show, if you could wave a magic wand over the BBC or the ITV or the Channel 4 and say, we would like this TV show brought back, maybe for one more series, which one would you bring back? There are obvious ones, I guess. Only Fools and Horses. I'd welcome another series of that. Dad's Army. I realise probably all of them are now dead, but I always used to enjoy that. I also thought that a new series of The Boys from the Black Stuff, if anyone remembers that, good way to hold up a mirror on modern Britain. But personally, I'm going for another series. Aaron Sorkin, I know you watch this show all of the time. If you could knock out another series of The Newsroom, I'd be very grateful. Only got 3 seasons, and I think it would be absolutely brilliant during the forthcoming and second round of Trump years. But what about you? What TV show would you like to see back again? Mick says, just remember 1978, when I was but 13, Jim Callaghan ignored the voters and said, what crisis? What crisis? Isn't it strange how you can be remembered for one sentence? That's why I mind my No, I don't mind my P's and Q's, as you well know. It would be awful to be remembered for one sentence, particularly if it turned out that you were completely wrong in that sentence. Go back to the mystery machine. Dan Cullen reckons it could be a Tata Hitachi TH86. It is not one of those. I'll take that away because it is time to get on with the show. I'll be back in just a moment with Hyundai block loaders. Do love me a specialist machine for a specialist application, and they don't come much more specialist than this.
building a comfortable tomorrow.
Out in the early part of next year. I wonder if that might coincide with Balmer. I think it might. Jim Turner says, on the subject of question of the day, which is what TV show would you like to bring back? He says Porridge. The new version, it ran for, I think, 6 episodes, and it was very good. Now, you've got me at a loss here, Jim, because I was that much of a fan of the original series of Porridge. I saw that they'd remade it with somebody, with a completely new cast, basically. And I just gave it a wide berth. But he says the fellow that played Fletch, the original one's grandson, did a great job of copying Ronnie Barker's mannerisms. Didn't see that. Didn't see it at all. Didn't see it at all. So, yes, missed that. Well, maybe I need to go and revisit that. Footy says, how about this one? Deep fried and battered mince pies and brandy ice cream. That's what I've just seen at the chip shop. Yes, please. Yeah. Yes, please. Deep fried anything, but deep fried battered mince pies. Are you listening to this, Gary? You're in the land of the deep fried everything, aren't you? That sounds like an absolute winner to me. Let's have a look. Chris Ford is going for The New Statesman. The New Statesman, that was a good show. Rick Mail. Alan Bastard. Do you remember Alan Bastard? Mostly Diggers have just joined us over on Instagram as well. Now, Mystery Machine. We are getting a little bit closer. Where are we? Here is Chris Ford, reckons it could be a Schaeff TL65 or TL863. It is not. Gary Muirhead getting a little bit closer with a Schaeff SKL 200. It is not. And just Dan Cullen's going for the Mechalak TLB 880. It's not that. Mick has just thrown in Yes, Minister. Yes, Minister was a fantastic show. Yeah. Hard to replicate those people, though, I would have thought. Really hard. Comic strip, loved it. Yeah, absolutely. Comic strip, The Young Ones, Filthy Rich and Cat Flap and all of those. Yeah, absolutely. Without Rick Mail, though, would it be the same? So, a bit more of the machine. There you are. I know people are on the right track now, but that's the Mystery Machine that you're working towards. Please keep the guesses coming in. Jim Turner says, try it, Mark. Give it a couple of episodes grace to get your head around it. To be honest, I realise this is a really strange thing to say. I didn't go to the new West Ham football ground, and it's not that new anymore, but I didn't go to that for 2 years because I was so resentful about the fact that it wasn't Upton Park that I was familiar with. It just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I boycotted it. I don't suppose they noticed. I don't suppose the boys went out on a Saturday afternoon and looked around the stands and thought, he's not here again. I don't suppose I made any difference at all. But there you are. Yes, Minister, say, going back to Mick, use the lot that are in now. They're just as cunning, yes, aren't they just? We've got Dan Cullen going for the Schaeff SKL 833. You're knocking on the door or you're hitting the post, but you're not quite there, Dan. I'm going to take that away for now because we've got lots and lots more to bring you. We're going to witness, that's something I never thought I'd say, we're going to witness the birth of a mine in just a second, so stick around.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Just going to round these out very quickly. Gary Muirhead reckons it could be a Schaeff TL80. It is not. Schaeff SKL 840. It is not, but you're very, very, very close. Thought you were going to say you felt guilty about not paying rent. Not sure what that relates to, actually. No, and Chris Ford, SKL 843. You're all very, very close, but you're not quite there. Let's have a little bit more. There you are, a bit more cab. Just keep the guesses coming in, and it is definitely not one of those. It is not a Schaeff SKL 821 either. Take that away for the moment. So mines, we all know what a mine looks like, but you ever stop to think, and how did that get there? About to find out. It gets there like this. Jim Turner says, love that. Great bit of footage. I totally agree. Never seen that before. Going back to the mystery machine, I can tell you that we don't actually have a winner. Excuse me. We don't have a winner. However, we have got somebody just ridiculously close. Chris Ford is going for the ZL100 from Schaefer. It is not one of those. He's also going for the SKL871. It is not one of those. Dan Cullen is going for the SKL871. It's not the SKL633. It is not that either. It's not this either. It's not an SKL631. But Dan, you will be astounded just how close you are. You're one letter away. Literally one letter away. Dan Cullen saying some video. Yeah, totally agree. We've got another good one for you in just a moment. Keep the guesses coming in on the Mystery Machine, and I'll be right back after this with more from LiuGong. Those fine folks at LiuGong are having a bit of a flurry of activity on their electric wheel loaders at the moment. We've already had one film middle of last week. We've got another one today. Take a look. Very quickly, need to address this. Dan Cullen says, but is it more environmental? More environmental at the point of use. More environmental at the point of use. How you get the juice in it, yeah, that's quite a different matter. You know, if you've got solar panels or a wind turbine or something like that, then yes, definitely more environmental. If, however, you're charging that off of a diesel generator, not so much. Not so much. And he also says, like the colour, but how long before each charge? I don't know specifically to the LiuGong. I'm going to guess 4 or 5 hours, maybe, thereabouts. Yeah, it makes sense. Before I forget, gents, I was working this weekend, was looking at the metal predictions. Start thinking of getting your scrap in before mid-December. I'm sure this is something we've touched on before, isn't it? There does seem to be a bit of seasonality when it comes to metal prices. So if anybody's sat on a big pile of scrap metal at the moment, Go have a look. Jim Turner says, cheers, Mick. I'll start having a look at local prices. There you are. Shop around. Get the max that you can. I can tell you, we do actually have a winner on our mystery machine. It'll come as no great surprise to learn that it is Dan Cullen. He said originally that it was the, when I can see it, he originally said it was a Schaeff SKL 631. It is not. It is one of those. It is a Schaeff SKS 631. And just to prove it, get Dan's name out of the way. No, that's the wrong one. There we are. There we are. An SKS 631. Now, just going back to, I think the first guess that Gary Muirhead came up with suggested it might be a Terex. For a while, Schaeff was Terex Schaeff. So you're not actually as far away as you thought, but not quite right either. Might get me a few pennies for an old crawler I've had my eye on. I realise you're talking about a machine, but an old crawler sounds like one of my ex-girlfriends. That's a whole other story. Kappa Group. You know Kappa Group. They've just joined us over on Instagram. Good morning to Kappa Group. Love your work, people. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We've got one more video, which is about sort of waste segregation, and then we're going to get on to my morning monologue, which is all about the respect that the demolition industry is owed but doesn't often get. I'll be right back after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Yeah, as I say, one more film. It comes from Epiroc. It was just under a minute long, actually. So, as we're going to be talking about demolition in just a moment, here is how you segregate your demolition waste with a bit of assistance from Epiroc. Given all that Mick was saying about just a moment ago about salvaging all your scrap and getting it in before Christmas, there you are. If you're in your market to do that, maybe Epiroc is deserving of a phone call. That's about it for the main part of this morning show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second, just before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, do please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. I hope to see you again very, very soon indeed. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back immediately after this. Right. Cards on the table. I realise I can be a bit of a negative Nancy at times. 5 days a week I seem to find something new to bitch and whine about. But on Friday afternoon last week, I was offered a little perspective, a little positivity. I interviewed the new president of the Institute of Demolition Engineers, Adrian McLean of Armac Group. And some of his enthusiasm kind of rubbed off. So today's morning monologue doesn't have quite the same bitter taste as usual. And you have the new IDE president to thank for that. And just on the subject of the IDE president, I'm going to be finishing that video today. Hopefully in the next 24, 48 hours, you'll be able to see that. About half an hour long. It's good. He comes across very, very well. So look out for that. But here is the morning monologue. Demolition rarely, if ever, makes the national news. When it does, it's often for all the wrong reasons. A project that didn't go according to plan, an accident on site, an injury, or worse still, a fatality. These moments, though incredibly rare, become the headlines, the narrative, and the public perception. And yet the thousands of successful, meticulously planned demolitions that occur every year, they remain invisible, unnoticed by the public eye, as though they never happened. If you listen to some environmentalists, they'd have you believe that demolition is the spawn of Satan himself, a hydraulic hammer smashing through any hope for a sustainable future. And politicians, always eager to appease the green lobby, seem intent on pushing demolition further and further into the margins, framing it as wasteful and archaic, a relic of a bygone era, rather than a vital part of modern development. Even within the construction industry, demolition's closest cousin, it's seen as little more than a bit part player, a necessary evil to endure before the so-called real work begins. They build up, demolition tears down, and in their eyes, it's as simple as that. But those in the demolition industry know better. Demolition is no mere sideshow. It's a highly skilled profession, one of precision, expertise, ingenuity. And demolition engineers, they're not just players, they're in a league of their own. Let's start with the safety record. You won't see this on the evening news, but the demolition industry's health and safety performance consistently outshines that of construction. Yeah, you heard that right. Despite the inherent risks of demolition work, the industry's safety standards are higher. And that's not by accident, if you'll pardon the pun. It's the result of an unwavering commitment to planning, training, and discipline. In demolition, mistakes are not an option. The margin for error is razor thin, and the stakes really couldn't be any higher. And what about the environment? The critics would have you believe that demolition is all about waste, that it's sending tons of rubble to landfill with every project. But that really couldn't be further from the truth. Modern demolition is a masterclass in sustainability. Demolition doesn't knock buildings down, it deconstructs them, salvaging materials for reuse and recycling. Concrete is crushed and repurposed. Steel is melted down and reborn. Timber is reclaimed. In many projects, upwards of 95% of a structure is diverted from landfill. Can we say the same about the new shiny buildings that replace them? And then there's the technical challenge. People often assume that taking something down is easier than putting it up. After all, creation is an art, while destruction is just brute force, right? Wrong. Taking down a structure, especially in a crowded urban environment, is an engineering feat of the highest order. Every building, every bridge or chimney stack is a puzzle, a unique combination of materials, history, and quirks that must be carefully understood before a single beam is touched. A demolition professional must have a working knowledge of structural engineering that rivals that of any architect. They must understand how materials age, how they interact, and how they'll respond under stress. Demolition men and women don't just study blueprints. They study the building's life story. Was it built with asbestos insulation? Was it reinforced with techniques no longer in use? Was it modified in ways that weren't recorded? These are the questions that have to be asked and answered before the first crack of concrete. In demolition, health and safety aren't just boxes to tick. They're a way of life. Every move is calculated to minimize and mitigate risk, not just to our own teams, but to the surrounding community. Working next to active railways, hospitals, schools and offices, all in a day's work for a demolition crew. And the environmental challenges don't stop with recycling. Demolition professionals are stewards of the air, custodians of the water and the soil around them, working tirelessly to prevent contamination. And while legislation surrounding these issues seems to change faster than the weather, demolition keeps up, adapting and innovating to stay ahead of the curve. And let's not forget about waste management. Demolition deals with the aftermath, the detritus of decades. Old wiring, decayed insulation, hazardous materials, it's all part of the job. Demolition doesn't just manage waste, it reimagines it, turning yesterday's buildings into tomorrow's resources. This is a profession that demands versatility. These are not just demolition engineers, they're structural experts, environmental scientists, logistics coordinators, and legal navigators. They're problem solvers, innovators, and occasionally miracle workers. And yet, how often do we hear their work celebrated? How often do we see it recognised for the skill, care and dedication it requires? Sure, demolition isn't glamorous. It's not the stuff of glossy magazine spreads or ribbon cutting ceremonies. They're not the ones posing for photos when the project is done. But without demolition, those new skyscrapers, bridges and homes wouldn't exist. Demolition clears the way for progress, often quite literally. And perhaps that's why demolition feels so misunderstood. They're the ones who clean up the past so others can build the future. It deals with the old, the worn out, the forgotten, the structures that have outlived their usefulness. And in doing so, they clear the space for something new to emerge. There's a poetic irony in demolition work. It destroys to create. It dismantles to renew. And in doing so, it carries both the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow. So the next time someone tells you that demolition is a necessary evil, think again. Think of the skill it takes to bring down a skyscraper without a single scratch to the surrounding buildings. Think of the environmental foresight required to recycle 95% of a structure's materials. Think of the lives saved by the industry's commitment to safety. Demolition professionals are not just wreckers. They're visionaries, engineers, and guardians of a world in transition. They deserve more than fleeting headlines when things go wrong. They deserve recognition for the countless times that things go right. Ultimately, demolition is not the end. It's the beginning. And it's about time the world saw it that way. Now, we'll go over to the chat in just a moment, although the chat's been very quiet while I've been doing that. Very quick point, and I wonder if we've kind of stitched ourselves up in the demolition industry because of our interactions with the media. Don't get it so much anymore, but there was a period of about best part of a decade, I would imagine, where I would get regular phone calls from TV companies saying they wanted to do a show based around demolition, and who could we speak to, who is the best, who are the best contractors, and so on down the line. And because I worked with a few. I was executive producer on one show, bizarrely. I kind of got used to the questions to ask. And one of the questions that I ended up asking was, will this be an honest representation of what demolition actually is? Or will you be implying jeopardy throughout? And by that, there was a TV show. I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't Scrap Kings. It was another one. But there was one that was focused on demolition. And they assured me that they wouldn't be focused on jeopardy and danger and everything else. And I know they went to see Downwell Demolition. We were on site with them at the same time, actually. Went to see Downwell, and they went to see somebody else, and they did an entire series. And as I say, I was with them on the site with Downwell, and Downwell were being highly professional. Obviously they had TV cameras there. We were there as well. And they were doing everything exactly as you would expect. The exclusion zones were in place. Everyone was PPE to the nines and all of that, all of which was fantastic. And they shot the same things that we shot. And then they went away. And by the time the voiceover was put on it, this could go wrong at any moment. The building's teetering on the brink. And, are these guys going to make... It was complete and utter bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit. But the problem is, having put that TV show out, there is now a perception within the minds of the people that watch that show that is what demolition is all about. It's not a case of this is all in a day's work. We're going to take down a 15-story tower block. That's what we do for a living. We've done it before and we'll do it again. Nobody's going to get hurt. Nobody's going to die. The machines aren't going to fall over. The building isn't going to collapse. This is all in a day's work. It's like representing football. Oh no, I always do football. Let's think about the number of cooking shows on TV. They do the same thing. Particularly when you think about MasterChef. What are you going to cook for us today? Oh, we're going to do wood roasted pigeon with a vanilla cream or something. I don't know. And it goes over to the chef, the judge. Oh, vanilla cream, very tricky, very tricky. And pigeon, it's difficult to cook, and it could all go wrong. It could be overcooked. It could be undercooked. Yeah, but it probably won't be, because these guys are doing what they do for a living. Like football, nobody starts a football match by saying, "Oh, here comes David Beckham. Needs to be careful. He could break his leg at any moment." Because David Beckham's good at what he does. Well, not so much anymore, but good at what he does. We don't do that in Demolition. When Demolition is shown on the TV, it's all about, this could go wrong at any moment. So what do we end up with? We end up with a public perception that Demolition is basically teetering on the brink of disaster at any moment. So that's the public perception. But then what does that do to employment? Imagine you're a 14 or 15-year-old boy or girl sat watching TV with your mum and dad, and you're sat there thinking, God, look at those machines and look at what they're doing. Do you know what? I reckon that could be the career for me. And by the end of it, you've listened to 30 or 40 minutes of people tell, this could go wrong at any moment. They're lucky to escape with their lives. Can you imagine going to your mum and dad? I quite fancy that. Your mum's going to have a heart attack. Of course you can't do that for a living. You heard about the danger? There's my thought. Blockade Demolition just joined us over on Instagram as well. What do we got in the chat? What do we have here? Mick says, not sure if you knew him, Mark. I heard old Ray Harvey passed away last week. The name rings a bell, but I don't know why. Don't know why. Who was Ray Harvey? Mick, remind me. Been here before, mate. Anything produced for TV has to be fucked about with. Yeah. I don't know why. I don't believe I'm that close that I don't see it for what it is. But I would walk past a demolition site, regardless of what I do for a living, and stop for a moment and go, bloody hell, look at that. Huge machines, or there's a remote control Brock over there. How are they doing that? Not, the danger and the hazards and the death. And why do we need to do that? Why can we not just show that as a standalone thing? Here's a set of skilled people doing a skilled job. Take a look at that. Mick says he was Aspect 4 demo. I know Aspect 4. Don't know then. Actually, as I say, the name rings a bell, but there's nothing in my head going, yeah, that bloke. Nothing of that at all. Mick says Demolition has always been on the bottom rung of the ladder in the construction industry, but the public loves watching it. And to think that in order to put that on national TV, you're right. The public. How many times? I mean, there's one in particular. I mentioned Adrian McLean earlier. Armac were doing a big job in the centre of Birmingham as part of the redevelopment of Birmingham city centre, and they had they put a hoarding around the entire site because it was a city centre and everything else. But they put viewing windows in the hoarding so people could stop. There were queues. And I mean that. I'm not saying that for journalistic effect. There were queues. There were people waiting to take their turn to have a look at the demolition. That is the public fascination with Demolition. But as soon as that is transferred to TV, all of a sudden, it needs to be, you have to play up the danger and emphasize the risks and the hazards and the potential loss of life. When in actual fact, we reported last week, and I don't know the actual figures, but we reported last week, the Health and Safety Executive, the latest set of stats showed that 51 people were killed in demolition and construction during 2023 to 2024. Off the top of my head, I reckon 3 or 4 of those would be in demolition. 3 or 4 too many, but compare that to construction, and yet you'll have TV shows dedicated to major construction projects, and they don't have to have the same thing. That we are not constantly told about the potential loss of life on HS2 or any of those things. It just doesn't exist. Doesn't exist at all. That's why I don't watch hardly any American so-called reality telly programs. Too much typed up shite. Yeah. Personally, and maybe I am too close to it, but maybe just show it for what it is. There was the world record explosive demolition happened in Abu Dhabi. Would have been very, very difficult to film because it was done in the middle of COVID and the lockdown and everything else. But, here is a world record blast, massive, massive buildings coming down all at once. There was no danger because there was nobody anywhere near it. The explosive crew were, half a mile down the bloody road. There was nobody inside. Why not show the skill and the precision of the pre-weakening and the drilling and the placing of the explosives and the planning that goes into it, all building up to that one moment of, there you go, there's the money shot, there's the building coming down. That's not the way we do it. Dan says, love the demo side of things. Pity it's not a skill job. Well, obviously it is a skill job, but it's not seen as that. Absolutely right. Going to rattle the cage again, even if the NFTC doesn't give a toss for the industry, no matter what they do or say. I haven't recorded this yet. Genuinely, I haven't recorded this, but I've got a script on my desk here for the intro to the video that I'm doing about, or the interview with Adrian McLean. Tell you exactly what the opening says. Over the span of more than 35 years as a demolition and construction journalist, I've seen countless trade body presidents come and go. In my experience, those presidents fall loosely into one of three categories. There are those whose presidency goes by without anyone really noticing. There's those who view their chain of office as the key to self-aggrandizement and who spend their entire presidency basking in their own glory at the expense of their members. And then there's a third category, a tiny exclusive group who grasp that their role is not to put themselves on a pedestal, rather it is to elevate their membership. I don't know how many IDE, NFDC, CPA, Build UK, I genuinely don't know how many presidents that I have interviewed over the course of 35, 36 years. But that final group who see their role as elevating their membership and elevating the industry, count them on the fingers of one hand. And that's across 20, 30, possibly even 40 presidential interviews that I've done. Mick says, Jim, you don't want to watch the Aussie demo programs. They make USA look good. Yeah, they do the same. They do the same. And I think it's important. Somebody did make, there you are. There's the most important point. I think this begins a lot closer to home than on TV. You know, I mean, basically, I can't remember who said it to me. It was when I was up at the IDE AGM. Demolition is seen as a necessary evil. Just produce a piling mat, then fuck off. That's that's kind of how they're viewed. Never mind the skill and the professionalism and everything else that goes into it. Just do your thing and then get out of the way, and then let the real work begin. And think about, I mean, I mentioned it in that spiel that I gave there. If you're building a new tower block, a new bridge, a new tunnel, whatever it might be, you've got in front of you a set of very, very detailed blueprints, instructions. You know, this goes there, that fixes to that, and you've got all of that. Because of the very, very poor way that a lot of that information over the years has been stored and recorded, and you get the idea. I can't think of the other word. But because that information is not always available, a demolition person, a demolition professional, a demolition engineer is required to look at a building and figure that all out for himself or herself. It's not, right, here's the blueprint, that's how it was all put together, now I've got to do that in reverse. It's, here's a building, I've got nothing to base this upon, apart from my own experience and expertise and knowledge and vision. I'm going to look at that building, right, okay, well, that is attached to there, and then that will do this. We can salvage that, but first we'll need to take that. That's all done on the fly by people that know their shit. There's no instructions. Think about, really oversimplify things. Imagine putting together an IKEA wardrobe, for example. You've got just the right number of screws, just the right number of shelves, just the right number of brackets, just the right number of panels and shelves and everything else. You've got everything is already done for you. And you've got a set of instructions, some of which are in English, some of which is in Swedish, but you've got a set of instructions. Now imagine being required to take that IKEA wardrobe to pieces to end up with all of those pieces, all of those constituent parts, precisely as they were delivered. You've got to end up with the right number of screws, all carefully removed, the right number of shelves, the right number of panels, the right number of bits of hardboard off the back. You've got to take that apart piece by piece, but with no instructions whatsoever. And while you're doing it, you've got to ensure that that wardrobe stays upright. So when you take a piece out, it doesn't just topple over. That's what we're talking about, but we're talking about that on a massive, massive scale. Mick says, I have to admit, as much as the public loves watching it, they are waiting for it to go tits up and get the hump when it don't. Yeah, there is a bit of that. Yeah, there is a bit of that. And there's also the other side of it. They're watching it so they can complain about it. I'm going to stand here on my phone until somebody drops drops something that kicks up a lot of dust, or somebody walks where they shouldn't. I've got it on film and I can report them for it. You're absolutely right about that. So true, Mick. People love watching it, but they don't see the work involved. No, they don't. And again, I mentioned Armac, and it was a city centre. You want the hoarding around, and you don't want people just strolling up and hanging around and being a pain in the arse. But because of that, we're not actually displaying our skills in quite the same way. It's not like a 14-year-old boy or girl on the way home from school can stand there for half an hour and go, Jesus, that's good. I wish I could do that. Instead of which, they've got a queue at a tiny window, or more often than not, they're going to stand there and look at a blank hoarding, and they might see a bit of boom going past at the top, or they might see something happening very, very high up that they can't really see properly. But everything else takes place behind closed doors. Mick says, you've hit the nail totally on the head. Takes experience not from a book or a course. You have to look at every aspect of the building, not the original plans. And now it's showing that some of the concrete from 50 years ago was pure crap. Yeah. Also, and I realise this is a bit of a joke within the industry, but that idea of, you're dealing with what happened years and years ago. There is reinforcing steel in that tower block. Is it consistent? Is it the same at the ground level as it is at floor 22? Is it all fixed exactly as it should be, or were they doing it against the clock, and maybe a few corners were cut while it was being put up, the upper floors? Maybe that wasn't being done quite the same way. Was the concrete and the steel put in place on a Friday afternoon when, frankly, the entire team wanted to be down the pub or going home? All of that you have to take into account. I think construction exists in a polished, ideal world. We will do this, and we will do that, and we'll do this, and we'll do that, and then this will happen, and that will happen. Demolition doesn't. Demolition is basically a blank slate of you having to second guess what happened on that building 40, 50, 80 years ago. You've got to figure that out at a distance and on the fly before you can even do anything. And all the while you're doing that, you've got a client or a main contractor in your ear. Come on, get a wiggle on. We've got a piling mat to go there. Come on, get it done. And you're stood there looking at a building. Was that built as it should be, or is that bit there iffy? And the number of times you speak to, I tend to find this particularly with explosive demolition, where a lot of beams and columns have to be exposed, as part of the pre-weakening, and they're taking bits of concrete off. And when they actually look at what they're dealing with, it's like, Jesus, I'm astounded. This bloody thing's still standing up, because it was so poorly constructed. And what Britain was like in the 50s, well, more the 60s and 70s. Tower blocks going up as fast as we could build them because we had a major housing shortfall. Could we all say hand on heart that every tower block in the UK was built to the best possible standard? I bet you can't. Think about car parks. We've had Mike Keogh on the show a couple of times talking about the state of the nation's car parks. If you're required to take down a car park right now, as a demolition contractor, you're probably going in there clenching. That thing's been there since the late 40s, early 50s, when we were desperately trying to encourage people back into our town centres. Immediately post-war, are we absolutely certain that car park is as structurally sound as we believe it to be? No, would be my answer. Wish I'd had a pound for every trail hole in buildings. Me and the hound would be sitting on a beach somewhere with a pint in my hand and a leg of lamb in his. Yeah, they do love a leg of lamb, dogs, don't they? But yeah. As I say, when you think about what a construction company has got, they've got detailed plans and digital twins and blueprints and detailed explanations and processes and protocols and everything else. And a demolition man or woman has basically got their eyeballs. You can stand there and look at that building and think, right, we've done one like this before. There's no guarantee that they'll be the same, but we've done. I mean, there's another point. The number of times that you speak to a long-term demolition person, and they've worked on literally neighbouring tower blocks that were both built. They're identical to look at, both built at exactly the same time, both built by exactly the same company, and yet when you scratch away the surface, chalk and cheese. And you've got to figure that out on the fly while being badgered and berated by a client who wants it done even quicker than you're planning to do it. I do derive my living indirectly from the world of demolition. But speaking to Adrian McLean, it really is. It was an eye-opener. I do think we do need a little bit more RESPECT around these parts. Not me. I think my days of expecting respect are long gone. Because what I do is about as popular as demolition. But and just going back to the point about legislation, I remember listening to Stephen Fry talking about London taxi drivers. A London taxi driver may have left school at 14, may not have an O-level or a GCSE to his name, but he knows. He's done the knowledge. He knows every highway and byway, back street, shortcut, rat run that London has to offer. He or she has crammed a shit ton of information into their head. Think about that in demolition terms. A demolition engineer, let's call them what they are, an actual demolition engineer, needs to understand structural engineering, waste management and protocols, environmental law and environmental legislation, health and safety rules and regulations, sustainability. There's so much that you as a demolition professional need to understand in order to do your job to the best of your ability, but also to satisfy the requirements of the industry today. You are basically operating at genius level. Yes, you're wearing a hard hat. Yes, you've got dirt under your fingernails. Yes, you're probably up to your shins in mud and bullets, but you are operating at genius level. You have crammed so much into your noggin that it's just astounding, honestly. Many a times I broke out around steel knuckles to see how they're joined. The amount of missing bolts makes the job so much harder. Yeah, and I miss. Think about that. I'll go back to the IKEA wardrobe. Imagine you've erected your wardrobe, but you were a bolt short. But that bolt was the bit that basically added that final bit of stability. Without that bolt, rather than your wardrobe standing there like that, rigid, you hang a shirt in it, and it does that. Think about that as a 20-story building. Think about that. And that is what demolition people are dealing with. Dan says, same here, Mick. If I had £1 for every job I put initiative into, I'd be a millionaire. This time next year, Dan, you'll be a millionaire. Okay, people, that is enough of that. I do need to go and record this intro to the Adrian McLean video because I do want to get it up and out. I do want people to see it because he speaks an awful lot of sense, does Adrian McLean. And I really, hand on heart, I do wish him well in his presidency. I hope he is given the backing to do what he needs to do, because the IDE, in the nicest possible way, is long overdue a kick in the arse. He is the right man to do that. I think his focus is 99.9999% on the members. I don't think that. I think he's a very humble guy. I don't think he's doing this as a feather in his own cap. I think he's doing it for all the right reasons. I just hope he's allowed to do it for all the right reasons. Mick says, when you're putting it up, I reckon in the next 24, 48 hours. By Wednesday, you'll be able to see it. Not a problem at all. Couldn't be asked, wasting time looking for work in this industry at the moment. Yeah, I can understand that. I'll be absolutely... I'll be absolutely honest with you. I woke up this morning, shit all weekend, mainly because of the weather, absolutely bloody horrible. And I did actually have a look at the diary to see how far away Christmas was. And I'm sure I'm not unique in this. I get to this point in the year where I just feel like I've had a few days off. But even when I was in Vegas or when I was in Sweden or wherever I've been, it's been working. I had Monday off last week. First day off I'd had in about 2 years, actual day off. So I am at the point now where I'm looking at thinking, will I make it, for one thing, will I make it energy-wise all the way to Christmas, but also content-wise? There's always a bit of a doubt at this time of the year. Will people keep producing videos in order to keep us going as a show? We'll always find something to talk about, so I'm not too worried, but that's one of the big concerns. Although we will soon be starting what we're referring to as the Mission to Munich, which is our lead into all things Bauma related, and I'm delighted, absolutely blown away to say that we're going to be sponsored on that. The Mission to Munich will be sponsored by MB Crusher, who basically agreed to that last week. So yeah, look out for that. That's coming soon. Last 3 weeks, 2 days work and letdowns. Yeah. Maybe we need to do something on that when I get back to being a moaning mini, which probably won't be that long. But that will do us for today, people. Go and have a good day if you possibly can, now that the wind has subsided. It was battening down the hatches here. 3 times I had to chase my wheelie bins up the road yesterday. I tried every configuration. We have 2. We've got a black one and a green one. And the green one was very, very light. So I wedged that against the wall, put the black one against it, then the black one fell over, and the green one shot off down the road. Tried numerous configurations. In the end, I thought, fuck it. And I just laid them down, pushed them up against the wall and laid them down so they were no longer on wheels. That seemed to do the job. I would imagine there were plenty of foxes outside, really, really frustrated about the fact that I'd closed the lids against the wall. But, you got to do these things, haven't you? Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. for more of the same. I will go and finish this Adrian McLean video because I think it's important that you get to see it. Might actually give you a bit of a warm feeling about Demolition, or at least about the IDE. And if you are of the Demolition Engineering persuasion, now would be a good time to look at becoming an IDE member. Really would. It's feels like a new dawn. If you want to be part of that new dawn, now might be the time to do it. Anyway, until tomorrow, everybody have a fine and splendid day. I'll see you all on the morrow. Till then, have a good one.